Here is a quick snapshot of the generations. Middle column is done by age as of this year in 2022. And the right side is the US peak population. In the bottom corner there, in the bottom right, you notice there's two asterisks, and those asterisks represent that those generations aren't that large anymore, unfortunately, due to folks passing away. But it still gives you a good sense of how the generations have stacked up over the years. And this mirrors most of the, around the globe too, the global population of the generations, but I use the US to give you kind of a good baseline. Now, it is really, 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 really important anytime you and I are talking about generations today and moving forward in the future, it's really important that we note this. Are you ready? Generations are clues, they're not absolutes. They're clues, not absolutes. But in my opinion, and I think you're going to agree with me after our short time together, they're very big clues on how you lead, communicate, recruit, sell, fill in the blank. The better understanding you and I have of each generation, the better equipped we are to thrive in the multi-generational marketplace and workplace that you and I operate in. Don't forget, anytime you find yourself involved in communication or a conversation around generations, do not forget they are clues, not absolutes. Here's a quick overview of generations. Broadly, generations are formed by significant events or trends during the multiple years of an age cohort. You know that to be true. And we now know the end point to Generation Z. I want you to think to yourself, why do we now know the end point to Gen Z? Many of you I know are thinking it's because of the global pandemic. The emerging generation, the youngest generation, Generation Alpha is the current name of the youngest generation that's currently alive. They will not have been old enough to emotionally process, or they will not have been born to have experienced COVID-19. So that is now the cutoff point. So that gives you an example of how these events can imprint generations, and that's kind of how we loosely define where generations land. Baby boomers are the only officially labeled generation by the Census Bureau. So the Census Bureau felt so compelled to label this generation because they'd never seen anything like it. When folks came back from war and they had there was a big spike in the birth rate, and then there was a very distinct decline as well. And that decline, of course, was attributed to the introduction of birth control. So there was this very distinct boom, and then the Census Bureau felt compelled to label it the baby boom generation. Now, that's the first and likely the last time that a government entity will actually label a generation. All the generational names that you and I now know are labeled by advertising agencies, by generational experts, by the generations themselves. They're all kind of loosely defined. Eventually, they kind of find their home and their names kind of get cemented. Age is a common predictor of differences in attitudes and behaviors. You can relate to this, right? Or you agree that a 25-year-old has different expectations, behaviors, experiences than a 45-year-old or 65-year-old. And then last but not least, and what I find perhaps most intriguing and fascinating, is that generational spans were typically 15 to 20-year spans are now shrinking due to heightened exposure.